Hi, my name is Martin Purnell and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church and where we can meet and hear from those that have made their faith count. This podcast series is to encourage via conversation, and you can contact us by email ogc@accessradio.biz, and biz is spelled B-I-Z. Today's guests, who are they? Well, they are pioneer mission leaders in South Belfast, Northern Ireland. They have been commissioned by the Methodist Church in Ireland to pioneer a culturally relevant mission based out of a Methodist church that has plenty of history, but without a congregation. The church building could easily have been sold, as it is in prime, as they say these days, real estate. But why wasn't it? What do pioneer mission leaders do? How do you encourage locals that may not be a part of the church, let alone a Methodist church? Considering that our guests are not from this island, how did they meet and want to become pioneer mission leaders under the Methodist banner? So it gives me great pleasure to welcome to Off-Grid Christianity from a place in Belfast today, hence why we've got a nice ambience of echo. David and Jill Hines. Guys, thank you so much for letting me come down here. Thanks also for the scones, my favourite fruit scones, which is always great. Question number one for the listener today is they have to guess where you're from. So best way to do that then is to do the 5 questions, if that's right, first of all, and we can get a better understanding of you. So question number one, if you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask them questions, who would it be? Let's go with Jill first. I'll be polite.
Thanks, Martin. It's lovely to be on with you. Yeah, I think probably for me, I'd really love to talk to Dietrich Bonhoeffer at the minute. I think probably just with the state of the world and the state of where we are, he would have a lot of interesting things to say. I think he's lived through all sorts of difficult things and hard decisions to make. And even in his pacifism, how he moved from that to decisions that he had to make, all of that, I would be really intrigued to ask him questions.
In case I have to bring him back in my time machine, can he actually speak English?
I think he can, because he actually went to America for significant periods of time, I think, actually. So he went over and was involved in, I think, some black churches and had a whole sort of sense of what was happening over there. I think he travelled quite a lot, didn't he? Probably.
And over to England.
The thing is, if I can bring back my time machine, I can certainly make sure I have a gadget so I can speak English.
That's it. Translation.
Yeah,
or make me speak German would be better, probably.
Young Dave.
Brother Lawrence.
Tell us more about Brother Lawrence.
Well, Brother Lawrence was a monk way back in the day who was in charge of doing the dishes. And as he got older, he got quite infirm and struggled a lot with sickness. But he became the one that all the young monks would come to for counsel. And he wrote a book, a famous small book called Practicing the Presence of God. And his key revelation was about, I'm going to do these dishes as unto the Lord and practice his presence here and now. He's an example of hospitality and humility and worshipping God in the moment.
Which country and how many years ago are we talking then?
Middle Ages. But I think
I need to know for my time machine, obviously.
Yeah, he'd be great crack. I just think there's, obviously the trend is towards activism. We want to be doing things. But I think this whole sense of whatever you do it as unto the Lord.
Well, it's the reason for doing it, isn't it? It's the character.
What I think even what I've learned in our work, that what you do will change. And some of it will be successful and some of it won't. But probably more important than what you do is how you do it.
Yes.
And I think let's do whatever it is we do, let's do it from good hearts as unto the Lord. And then that we can trust the Lord with the increase. You know,
from washing plates to being a multimillionaire, it's how you do it, isn't it? I'll be happy to do the multimillionaire bit. Thank you. Great answer. Good old Brother Lawrence. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable? Let's go with you first of all, please, David.
I think for me, it's the parable of the great feast. You know, Father Ted here, you know, you will. You know, that when they're offering a cup of tea.
Mrs. Doyle. And it's this compel them all to come in, not in a violent way, but in a winsome, persistent, courageous, encouraging. One of the things Angie, who we know from Birmingham fame.
Previous podcast, she will say, who's missing at the table? You know, who's missing from your local community? Who's missing? Why are they missing? How can you get them in? And I think that sense of the kingdom being a feast of joy, of intimacy, of peace, that everyone is invited to. And it's just about, you know, doing what you can. Our job is as stewards. We set the table. We have a community meal that we do once a week and 80, 90 people come and have dinner together. We're doing it in the Catholic Church Hall at the moment because our place is under refurbishment. But I do a lot of setting out tables and chairs and then putting out cutlery. And it takes a while, you know, and I'll often be sort of just singing to myself It's a meditative moment for me, actually. And I'm often praying as I prepare the table for people to come in. And I think almost as a church, that's our job. We sometimes think we're the host. We're not the host. We're the stewards. We're the ones who sort of prepare the table. And then the Lord is the master of the feast. And I think he bids everyone to come in. So I think so often we're gatekeepers and we actually need to be stewards a bit more. But that parable of the great feast, there's room for everyone, and the kingdom is a feast, and it's abundance, and it's joy, and it's peace, and the Lord is the host.
Jill.
Yeah, I think for me, I really love Jesus washing the disciples' feet. I think that has always been a really special story to me. But I think that little verse that comes just before he goes to wash their feet, it says Jesus knew where he had come from and he knew where he was going. And I think that just speaks the world. And so he was able to go and do the most sort of self-sacrificial thing that we can imagine, starting with washing their feet. And I think for me, that's as we live our everyday, daily, ordinary lives, if we can have an understanding of where we've come from and where we're going, who we're going with, I think that is a really beautiful way of living life.
Great answers. Question 3. If you were Prime Minister for the day and could change any law or impose a new law, what would it be?
To be honest, I would like to start at ground level. For me, I think there's all sorts of things we need to be doing at ground level. So I'd love to be working on the housing situation, firstly, in Northern Ireland. I'd love there to be more housing for communities that really need it, and especially for vulnerable women is a real big thing for me.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Dave. Yeah.
I would bring in a 10-year plan for political management here. So there's less of this short-termism and knee-jerk reactions to whatever's politically current. And so we can actually ensure some development for the common good going ahead. So things like water, things like health, things like the justice system, these things can actually agree on a plan for the common good that everyone signs up to and agrees to.
Thank you. Good luck with getting that through, by the way. You must probably give up after the 3 hours. Question 4. Outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out? Jill, what do you want to go for first?
Probably for me, anything usually involves outdoors and being in nature. And I think the memory that sticks out right away comes to mind is a day that we took just walking from Ballintoy Harbour to Giant's Causeway, and just had a whole day to walk along the coast and think and walk and move and just be surrounded by nature, the beautiful coastline of Northern Ireland. So I think for me, a sense of pilgrimage, a sense of quiet, and a sense of being in the beautiful outdoors.
Ballintoy Harbour is gorgeous, isn't it?
Beautiful.
It's starting off with that big cave.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
People say, isn't that in Game of Thrones?
It is.
Yeah, which I've never watched, but apparently it is. It's a thing, apparently. It's a TV
it's everywhere,
series.
I think.
Yeah.
They've taken every good spot in Northern Ireland.
Not my golf course yet, though. They haven't taken that. Dave, what we go for, please?
My great-grandfather bought a little touring caravan and parked it in a shed on Anglesey in north of Wales.
Yeah.
And ever since then, my extended family has been holidaying there. And I say sometimes one of my Horcruxes is buried in that caravan. And if you're a Harry Potter fan, you'll understand the reference. But basically, it's a place where, for me, I go and I sort of remember who I am. And there's stillness and there's quiet and beauty. Often you'll see peregrine falcons, choughs there, and the kids will go fish off the rocks, and lots of walks and a beach. And I think that, for me, is a perfect day.
And if people say, who's Harry Potter? I think he played for Bolton Wanderers in the 1930s. Or am I slightly out of touch? Question 5. What has been your most embarrassing moment? Go on then, Dave, you kick off first, please.
I've got lots. I've got 3 embarrassing moments. 2 involve being naked. So we lived in India for about 8 years, and I was trying to dress like a local. And so we wore these dhotis. They're kind of like, basically it's a dress. It's very David Beckham. So like a sarong.
Whoever he is.
Yeah, whoever he is. Anyway, so I would spend a lot of my time like wearing flip-flops and a sarong and a vest, basically, for a long time. Anyway, one day I had this car that was very temperamental. And I was driving in this car with a couple of blokes to do a job. And the car stalled and it needed a push start. So we got out and I start pushing the car in the middle of the town centre. Now, if you ever tried pushing a car wearing like a sarong or a dhoti, they kind of go right down to your ankles. And you give yourself a bit of an angle. I trod on the hem of my dhoti, and as I pushed forward, I pulled it down. And so I was there in the middle of the town centre, with everyone watching this white guy pushing the car, basically in my knickers, exposed to everybody. So I then quickly, I did a little woo, jumped up and down, pulled up my little dhoti, wrapped it around me, jumped in the car, and said to the lads, we need never speak of this again.
David Beckham, is he related to Brooklyn? You might have heard of it. Jill.
Yeah, similarly when we were in India, and I haven't actually admitted to this, so this is the first time I've admitted to it, but we were learning Malayalam, which is a very beautiful language, but very, very difficult. So we had a guy who would come in and give us Malayalam lessons every day, and we would always start off with a cup of coffee, and he would always take sugar in his coffee. So I was making the coffee, and he comes, sits down at the table, we start to get ready, and I go into the kitchen to prepare the coffee, and I realize, our sugar canister's empty. So I'm looking around the kitchen, and everything in Calicut where we're living comes in bulk. So everything kind of comes in these plastic bags that you go and fill up. And there was a bag of sugar sitting on the ground next to the door. And I thought, why is that sugar down on the ground next to the door? That's a bit silly. But la-di-da. Up I pick it, pour it into the canister, and put about 5 teaspoons into his coffee because that's how strong he liked it. And off I go with his coffee, and he proceeds to drink the whole cup, and we do our lesson. And later on in that day, I was making some cookies with the kids, and we had a friend living with us who was a Malayali from Kerala, and she came in and she was tasting the batter, and she was like, oh, this doesn't taste right. What's wrong? It's very, very sort of metallic-y. So I'm looking around, finally figure out, it must be the sugar. Something's wrong with the sugar. David comes in the kitchen, at which point I think, and
Beckham or your husband?
That's it.
Easily confused.
I was like, what was that sugar doing on the ground next to the door? And he goes, Jill, that's not sugar, that's lawn fertilizer. By which point I'm like, oh crap, what do I do? So I probably poisoned and made him sort of probably dead at home, right? So I call our other friend and I'm like, is this stuff really poisonous? Do I need to call him and tell him? And he laughed and said, actually, no, he'll be fine. So I didn't actually admit it to him because I was just so embarrassed.
Wow.
And then the next morning he called and said, I'm not feeling great. I don't think I'm going to come in today. And I was like, no problem. You just take your time.
You take your time.
So there you go.
Yes, but the good thing is you'll never have weeds growing in his stomach.
That's it. He's nice and cleansed.
Yeah, he's been nice and cleansed. I can identify with that story. I'll tell you afterwards. Yeah, I almost killed my boss. Similar sort of thing. I thought it was milk powder. It turned out to be something completely different.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's not so unusual.
No, there's at least 2 of us now. Guys, thank you so much for that. So let's start off then. I'll just say accents, if they could guess. Jill, where are you from and why are you over here in Belfast, please?
Good question. So I am from Oregon on the west coast of America is where I was born. But I came over when I was about 18 to Dublin. I did some work over here in Dublin for a while and then proceeded to take the next few years to kind of travel back and forth between Dublin or Belfast some of those times and Oregon. And one of those visits, I met the David Hines sitting next to me and we fell in love we were doing a pilgrimage around the borders of Northern Ireland, and for 2 months we walked the whole of the border.
You did
of
walk
Northern
500
Ireland.
miles.
I did. David didn't. It's contested that David didn't because he drove the vehicle.
That's called wisdom.
But so then we fell in love and were married very quickly and we moved over to Belfast. So we often say, like Mother Teresa did, we are not Northern Irish by birth, we're Northern Irish by choice. We've been here for the last 25 years, except for about 8 years in the middle where we moved to India for a while.
And for those who don't know, Mother Teresa actually lived here for quite a few months. It's a long story or a very short story, depending which way you look at it. David, your accent then, please, and why are you over here?
So I'm from Ipswich in the southeast of England, famous for Ipswich Town Football Club and Ed Sheeran.
Yeah, we don't talk about them. Football club, that is.
I came to Belfast for university, I think because it was the furthest place in the UK I could get to away from home. So I think that had something to do with it. And this was back in the bad old days when you could count the number of Englishmen over here not carrying guns on about one hand.
Because of the Troubles, as it's called.
Because of the Troubles, yeah. So I came over to Northern Ireland. And if you've ever seen the Derry Girls, there's the wee English fella in the Derry Girls. He's modelled on me. Basically, that was me when I first came over. And this was, many in the early 90s. I stayed. I think I felt called here in a very grand sense of the word. I wanted to be what I call in my head a redemptive Englishman over here in Northern Ireland. So that's what I tried to be.
What we're going to do in this particular podcast is go and see what you're actually doing over here. Depending on the weather, we've got maybe 2 venues we could go to. And if they serve scones as good as they serve here in your house, then it's just going to be game, set and match. But before we go out on the road, let's talk about why you're actually in Belfast now.
Well, we are employed by the Methodist Church. They had a big old church building on the Ormeau Road that had a declining congregation. They encouraged us that when we were coming back from India, they basically offered us a job and they said, would you do something innovative with this old building? If you had a big old building in South Belfast, what would you do with it that's in keeping with 150 years of legacy and sort of Methodist tradition on the Ormeau Road? How would you then interpret that into something which is contemporarily relevant and could be a blessing? But the building on the foundation stone of the Balnaphine Methodist Church, when the foundation stone was laid, the person said, let this building be a light and a blessing to the local neighbourhood. And I think that's what we want to carry on. Because in one sense, I think big old church buildings can go dark. You know, if they're only used 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week, and there's a cold, empty building for the rest of the week. And I think that's what we wanted to relight or renew. There's plenty to work with. There's a tremendous legacy. There's lots of faithfulness. And the building itself is a multi-million-pound asset that's been basically paid for over and over by the local community over the decades. So our thought was, how can we give this back to the community so it actually does become a light and a blessing to everybody, not just a private members club that churches can, any organisation can turn in on itself and become that way. Excellent. So that was our challenge, and that's what we've set about doing over the last 6 years.
Excellent. Just to let you know, apart from the clock, which isn't Big Ben, but it plays the same tune, we've got a lovely dog over here called Buddy, who loves scones. You might hear him from every so often.
Scratching himself.
Yeah, scratching himself. But he's obviously enjoying the podcast, which is even better. And if he had his own Christian radio show, it'd be called Pause for Thought, of course.
Oh,
just sort of throw that in.
Edit that one out.
No. Jill, we're going to go out on the road in a minute and we can have a look at these places, which is going to be fantastic. But it's already been mentioned that you were in India for 8 years. And in light of previous podcasts where I end up talking about getting your hands dirty for Christ, which has been so important for me with regard to Dave Pope and his Dirty Hands tour from the mid-1980s, why did you, having met and fallen in love and got married, go to India?
It's probably a very long and big journey of how we went to India. I think we both, when we were young, we both traveled quite a lot and had decided early on probably that we wanted to take, when we had our kids, we wanted to take them outside of the Western world and give them a little bit of an experience outside of what the West is. And so I think that was a really big factor. I think another one was just realizing our privilege here and actually if we could be a bridge to communities there and how we could work with those guys. I think we went, as you always do with these things, you go with good intentions and realize actually that you gain so much more than what you have to bring. So for the first wee while, we had all these big idealistic dreams as young kind of idealists. But I think as we got there and realized and just made deep, profound friendships and realized actually there's so much here that we have to learn, it was a real rich soil for our own development and our own learning. And I think we were formed in really beautiful ways by India that I will always be grateful for. We worked with a local charity there up in Udakamund, which is a hill station where actually, what's her name from Northern Ireland? Amy Carmichael went on her holidays. She went up from her place down on the plains. She would come up to the Udakamund for her holidays up there. We went there and worked with a local charity that was just incredible called Smyrna Fellowship Trust that works a lot with sponsoring kids through education, especially young girls, getting them through second and sometimes even third level education. And we just were amazed at how education just in one generation can really actually change a family's whole trajectory and can bring people out of poverty in such a beautiful, incredible way. For us, that was a really, really special time of just learning and seeing and opening our eyes.
So what did you actually do over there, Dave?
Well, we went to 2 places. The first place we went to was in Kerala, in a very Muslim sort of community. And we went out with a local mission agency based in Northern Ireland. And we moved into a very Muslim area and set up a travel business. And then we set up a guest house. And then we set up a primary school. And we worked in a school for a while. And then we set up a primary school, which is still running today, actually. It's with a special emphasis on kids with special needs.
Wonderful.
And again, an inclusive sort of reach, so it would have Muslims and Christians and Hindus all coming together, gathered around a child-centered education model, which is a bit more compassionate maybe than the rather strict kind of version of education they had there. And our dear friends, Joy and Thangama and Joycey and Jibu, they run it even now. And it's got about 100 kids and about 20, 30 staff. And in one sense, we were part of setting it up, but we're by no means made it what it is today. So these were all sort of things that we did in those first few years. And then in the second 4 years, we moved up to Uti, like Jill said. And that was about supporting that charity, raising funds. We developed a business. We converted an old colonial bungalow into an Airbnb to raise funds for the business so it could become less dependent on foreign funding for the charity and a bit more self-sufficient. And that's done really well in helping it become sustainable and self-sufficient into these new times with changing politics and economics and even COVID. So that was a brilliant project. We loved it. We found the first 4 years really difficult in many ways. And the second 4 years, we were more settled, and it was two contrasting periods of time. But we were profoundly touched by our time there. And Joy and Tangama, I mentioned earlier, are probably our Christian heroes.
In light of the Peter Meadows tribute that came out a few weeks ago, and in light of what Dave Pope was saying, one of the things, takeaway for me, is that Peter was able to do, not just set up Buzz magazine, not just set up Premier Asia, not just set up Premier Christianity magazine, not just set up Spring Harvest, but able to do more. He kept moving on. Whereas too many Christians these days set up something, think, look what I've done. And in fact, they haven't got a clue about running a business. And consequently, it crashes around them and they can't understand why. You had the strength to leave. Why?
I think we realise that good development always sort of leaves when, especially if you're in another country that is not your own, I think, or you aren't the local there. I think we realised actually we could stay and this could be very much about us, or we could go and let them, as they did when we were there, they really owned it for themselves. And I think that's our big heart for everything that we start, is actually how do we get people to own this for themselves and actually really sort of own it and lead it and make it in their own flavor, in their own way, that so that it's not just something that's planted there, but actually something that is in depth into the soil that actually becomes, it's not grafted, it's actually planted deep into the soil of the culture and the people around and the people that have the giftings to run it.
I think Ash and Ange were quoting Lao Tzu the other day, saying, go to the people, live among the people, teach the people, and then when you leave, they'll say, we did it ourselves. And I think that's just good development work. And also, I think it's an awareness of your own limitations, because we could start something, but we don't have the capacity to develop a huge project and really flesh it out. There's other people who can come along and do that. And at the end, when we left India, that had a lot to do with our own kids. The project we were finally involved with, the refurbishing the Airbnb and starting up a coffee shop there, we'd sort of done the starting work and trained people up, and it was running successfully. So there was a sense that, right, here's an opportunity now for us to leave, because we don't need to be here in quite the same way we needed to be last year. And also our kids, our eldest was then 16, 14, 12 and 11. So one was going into A-levels, one was going to GCSEs, one was going into big school. And there was a sense that we'd kind of played fast and loose with our kids' education to that point. But maybe here was a really good time for them to sort of click into the UK system at a really important time, so there was a sense that actually we need to start to consider them as well, not start to, and like we weren't considering them, but I think now's the time to prioritise the kids. We can either stay here in India for another 10 years, or now would be a chance to leave without really letting people down. We could do a nice smooth handover and step back. And when we did step back, we
also wanted them to acclimatise to the culture here. They'd spent most of their growing up years in India, and so we didn't want Mia, our eldest, to go into university and just have a complete culture shock. We wanted her to be able to be with us for a couple of years before
which is great.
She goes off. So there was a lot of sort of reasons there that meant for our kids' sake it was time for them.
And when we finally came back, then you got the COVID-19 pandemic suddenly hit like a couple of months after we got back. So that was a mercy as well.
Unless, of course, you were the people that brought it over.
That's it.
There you go. That could be a lasting testimony, couldn't it? On a serious note, though, the fact that you met at university, what did you come to study at university in the first place?
Well, I studied sociology and social anthropology at Queen's.
Which is very handy.
It was. I didn't think it was quite so handy at the time. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
But the older I get, the more I realise how it's formed me and enabled me to think about cultures
Yeah.
and social systems, and how a lot of what we do is actually cultural and social.
Yeah.
Rather than we have our fundamentalist ideals about the purity of our own thoughts and logic. But actually, a lot of what we do is sociological and cultural. So that really helped me actually in terms of going cross-culturally, working cross-culturally, but also seeing, even in our own culture, how blinkered we are sometimes and blind to what is more obvious to outsiders maybe. So, yeah, and systems, the way people work. And then after that, I worked with YWAM, Youth with a Mission, for a while, doing sort of youth work. And then Jill came over to do that. It was called the Reconciliation Walk. It was a walk around Northern Ireland, a sort of ecumenical walk with Protestants and Catholics praying. We'd be staying in church halls all the way around the border of Northern Ireland. If you know the geography there, you'll know that some towns are Catholic and some are Protestant predominantly. And so it would either be in a Catholic church hall or a Protestant one, and then they'd throw a barbecue for us, or they would do some sort of prayer for peace event with us. And we were the catalyst for various peace initiatives that summer. The summer of the Omagh bomb, actually.
Yes.
And we were in Omagh a couple of weeks before that bomb went off. It was a brilliant summer, and I think we fell in love somewhere around Fermanagh.
Place.
And who wouldn't?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So, Jill, what were you studying at university?
So I just did Bible college. I did a couple exchange programs and then went into YWAM as well.
For people like listening today thinking, well, you keep going on, Martin, about wanting to get my hands dirty for Christ, but, what am I going to do? Well, here you go. This is what you studied. And just let God show you what he can do with what you've got. That's basically it, isn't it? And you went over, and consequently, you've now come back. And, of course, the big next question will be, what's going to happen in a few years' time when this has been fully grounded, what we're going to see any minute now, and then you have to leave.
Be more than a couple of years, Martin.
Well, let's go and find out. Where are we going to go first?
We're going to go to the community garden, I think, first. We'll take you over there. Probably most people will have already done
There's
a
probably
morning's
no
work.
scones left.
There's probably no scones left.
Angela might have made some
But
shortbread or something.
It's the Knockbreda Community and Wildlife Garden, which was one of our first projects we did when we
I
came
look
back.
forward to it. And that's my fault for feeding Buddy with my scone.
That's it.
So, Jill, whilst your husband is outside, why are we in the shed and whereabouts are we in Belfast, please?
Well, we're in the shed because it's miserable outside, but we're actually in Knockbreda Community and Wildlife Garden, which is tucked back in behind a few houses in a property that you wouldn't even recognize. You wouldn't even see from the road. You wouldn't know it's here, but it's a lovely little secret garden that we've thrown open to the public. It's a bit of land that was attached to the Methodist Church, Knockbreda Methodist Church, that's now Cornerstone, an old derelict piece of land that a team of us came in just before COVID hit, actually, and got rid of skips and skips and skips of rubbish. And slowly and surely, the community has kind of taken it over, and we've made it into a really beautiful spot for people to garden, to chat, to drink lots of tea, and to look at the tadpoles.
So it's a typical day in Northern Ireland, from the fact that, I've lived here for such a long time as well now, so we appreciate the fact that it's cold and windy and wet. The size of the land, I would say, is about 3/4 of a football pitch. But you see, it's literally surrounded by houses. Dave, why did you want to change it to what it is today, first of all?
It had been allotments way back in the day, and we had the access from our church car park into that space. But it was wasted ground. It was not being used. And I think for us, when you're looking at how can you bless the local community, we did a community survey and saying, what are your felt needs? And most people said dogs crapping on the pavement and my husband with too much time on his hands, was really what people said. We thought, well, it was just coming into COVID and we had this space and we thought it's an outside project. It's all about wellness and community and ecology. Well, let's get this thing going.
There's a lovely agrarian theologian called Norman Wurzba, who's a bit of a hero of mine, and he talks about how every church needs to have a garden, how we are so land rich and church properties should all be actually having a garden because our very theology can be informed by it. So it's been an incredible project of actually learning when you get your hands into the earth, what that does for your relationship with Creator as well is such a beautiful thing. So not only has it been this incredible thing for the community that has given us loads and loads of lovely friendships and relationships, and it's been healing in so many ways, but it's also given us a real sense of widening our theology out a bit as well.
What I can see straight away is that in the past there might have been certain mission agencies, and we're maybe going back 100 years ago, or maybe even less, saying, right, this is what we're going to do. You just storm in and do it. Whereas what you did, in fact, was do a survey first. And then you thought, oh, well, maybe we could do something as a result of it. What surprises did you get from the survey that has actually reaped rewards as a result?
I think for us, actually washing the feet of the community is it's the model of Jesus in many ways. Jesus spent most of his time going around healing people and meeting felt needs. And I think often we go in as a church and say, I know what you need. You need this, this and this. And it's some sort of stripped down version of a sort of a new contract with God. And actually it's not necessarily good news for people, especially here in Northern Ireland. You've got to understand the context. This is where people's idea of what is the gospel has been fought over. And the passive observer looking in from outside doesn't see an awful lot of good news in this. And also everybody here has been preached at and condemned and beaten down on all sides, whether by some sort of like fire and brimstone preacher in the town centre or, in the high church by some sort of like priest or minister telling them that they're going to hell or whatever it is. So that's not an attractive gospel for people. And I don't know where the good news is in that, to be honest. God hates you and you have to do this and this to stop him killing you forever. That's not a beautiful gospel. I think when you come in with the love of God and start to serve the needs of the community, I think people see it as good news, they're attracted to it, and then the relationships start to grow and people start to unfurl. You see laughter in the garden, you see joy, you see sharing, you see suffering.
Well, let's have a look more in the garden then. What about this hut then, which is about half the size of a badminton court, but it's got solar panels on top. Tell us more, please, Jill.
It's the tea shed, which is the most important thing about the garden. So it's where we always gather for our tea and cakes and everything. We always have a wee bit of time to work in the garden, but then we're always coming inside. So that is the first thing that we put up, actually, and then we got some funding for some solar paneling, so that was all installed, which is brilliant. And we've got our well over here as well that was on site when we came, and we were able to sort of get a pump from a local donation and able to use that, so we have all our own water that we pump into the garden as well. So that's been an amazing thing as well.
Is it drinking water?
We do drink it. We boil it and drink it, so it's fine. But we use it mostly for the watering of the plants. Yeah. So, and then we've got pizza oven and barbecue, because again, hospitality is one of the main things that we focus on, and eating is so lovely together. So we do lots of eating together. Got lots of picnic tables donated from the council that they've given us, and then this is our flower bank. In the spring and summer, it's just really beautifully flowered, and loads of people work on that throughout the time. We've got our wildlife pond, which David can tell you about.
Yeah. This has been here.
Have a look at it.
One of the first things we put in as well. Got a digger in and dug a big pond. It's beautiful.
And it says here, danger, deep water. How deep is it?
It'll be up to your chest, maybe. Well, no, it's about 4 feet at the deepest, but deep enough for the kids. Yeah, so it doesn't have any fish in it, so it's all about tadpoles, and they're probably hibernating down at the bottom now, but it's full of oxygenating plants. Yeah. And if we do a lot of pond dipping with primary schools. They come and they love the whole sort of life cycle of the frogs, and you do some pond dipping, you pull up all little leeches and like little water nymphs and all sorts of stuff. So it's really makes a big difference to the wildlife in the area to have a pond like this.
We're on a slight gradient going upwards, and I would say this pond takes up about 15 yards by 10 yards. It's lovely, isn't it? Especially in the summer. I can't wait for an invite to come back, especially if you've got pizza oven.
We've got our little festoon lighting here. This is for parties. It's the feast, like I was telling you earlier.
Yes, and you also got a speaker outside as well for a PA.
We have a pizza night and pub quiz kind of night that we do for charity every year, so that's used a lot for that. We've got ukuleles play and the community choir. Everybody's using it, so it's great.
That's wonderful. So this polytunnel is about the size of a badminton court. There you go.
You like your badminton, don't you?
Well, it's an easy way to describe it, size-wise.
So these tables we made ourselves. So right down the middle of the polytunnel, we've got basically workspaces. This is at the height of a wheelchair, so wheelchair users could use this one. And then up here, this is like a large table tennis table, 2 table tennis tables.
Yeah.
Now this grapevine, this was given to us by someone, and it was literally just a stick of wood. Somebody said, this has stopped growing, this is ours, you can have it if you want. And it flourishes now. It
covers the whole entire polytunnel. Beautiful clusters of grapes. Looks like nothing at the minute, but it's actually full of life in those twigs.
Right, that's 2 reasons to come down here in the summer. I'm purely thinking for my stomach here.
It's all bedded down. You've got cardboard on all the beds at the moment, and this is just to keep the soil warm, to keep the bacteria doing its thing. And
Oh, no, don't send me outside.
No, come on. Let's go.
So we're coming further north.
Okay, these are our wonderful compost beds here. So this is more noble than it looks. So there you go. We've got these 3 compost beds right next to each other.
Made out of breeze blocks.
Yeah, I know it's
4 foot by 4 foot.
But you know, if you go down, probably quite a long way down.
And yes, again, you've got more picnic tables.
Lots of raised beds. This is the tool shed over here, which has tools and then also saws and things like that in there. So a lot of our decking and our raised beds and everything have been made here. We have a partnership with the probation board, and they often have a crew of guys here doing things, and they love having sort of outside practical things that they can do to help the community.
And you've got a path going all the way up in the middle of the land till we get to the very top here. Like a pergola, isn't it, here, really?
Yeah, it's kind of like the gazebo. This is one of the last things we've done. Yeah, it's just a place to sit at the top of the garden, and you can look out over the roofs and see the hills of Belfast.
Yeah, you can indeed. This is interesting because we've got some trees up here. I believe you've got caution beehives.
Yeah, these are the beehives up here. So we have a guy called Damien who's a local beekeeper, and he keeps native Irish bees here, which is obviously great for the garden and great for, you know, the whole area. And actually all these houses around, that's Joe's house there. He's got a little gate, you know, in the side of his fence there. Kieran, I was talking to earlier, has got a little gate in the side of his fence. There's a few people around here who kind of like have owned the community garden as their own and come and go as they please. And it's brilliant because the more it's owned by everybody, the more it becomes more than the sum of its parts.
We've made mention in the previous part of this podcast about the troubles. How reflective is it in this garden here where people from different denominations could just come together and work together?
Yeah, I think one of the lovely things is that it's not really the first thing you think about. But as you talk to people and as people come on to the team and start to get involved, you realize, we're a real mix of Protestant, Catholic, no faiths, Hindus, all sorts of different faiths. So in one sense, one of the things we really love about it is that it's everybody belongs. There's no sense of needing to know it's very much a natural environment.
I think the soil really grounds you, and you were saying earlier about this, there's a humility that comes to trying to work the land, and if you've ever tried to grow anything successfully, you'll know that it can be frustrating and it can be hard work. I can't remember who said it once, but they said inside man-made structures, you know, our cathedrals, our buildings, when you bring the ceiling down, everyone can feel a little bit self-important, like I've made my environment. But then when you go outside, especially, you know, when you take the ceiling right up to the stars, and when you consider the heavens or the mountains, you realise actually we're quite small and there's a limit to what we can do. We can start this gardening process, but we can't make the thing grow. And so I think working together like that, you need one another, the divisions we have and the ideas that we may or may not have. You start talking about life experience when you're digging together, when you're doing stuff together. You know, you have good crack, but it becomes much more healthy interaction. And
well, you've sold it to me, but you also made mention about just planting things. The first thing we did when we moved to our house was plant an apple tree. And of course we're reaping the benefits 5 years later because I can make cider and stuff.
We have an apple pressing day, actually. This is where it sits, and we stick press. We borrow from a local community group, and we have a whole day of pressing our apples. And this year we had to do 2 because we had so many apples.
It was phenomenal, wasn't it?
It was amazing.
Well, take me to your apple tree and tell me the story behind it, please.
There's cherry, there's plum, there's apple, there's pear.
This one here is Mark's tree. We've had several trees that people from the local community have come and planted for a loved one that has passed. So that's been really special as well.
Is there a special apple tree that you'd like to talk about?
I mean, this one was one of the first trees we planted. When we first started the garden about 5 years ago, we planted the orchard first. Angela and Richard Loudon were our key members, and Angela we affectionately call the queen of the polytunnel. So the polytunnel we're in just there now, you don't plant anything without Angela's say-so in the polytunnel. But her husband Richard had a whole history in youth work and community work, and he's just fantastic character who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But their son Mark, when we were planting this orchard, their son Mark was dying of brain cancer, and so we had invited them to plant a tree for Mark, knowing that his death was imminent, that it could be a memorial for him going forward. And that planting was cancelled by a couple of weeks actually because of rain, but then when we finally came back to do it, we were all gathered together, the whole community. The minister of the local church was here as well, and just as literally they came to plant the tree, they got the phone call saying that Mark had died. And it was a very holy moment, actually, quite a sacred moment, where the hairs on the back of your neck, because half an hour previously they'd been in their house, you know, an hour later they were by themselves somewhere, but here they were enfolded in community, and we all stood around as they dug the hole and they planted the tree, literally watering it with their tears. And the garden's been a tremendous solace, especially to Angela since then. You know, her husband again then died a year or so later during COVID. And she is the queen of the polytunnel. She's here every day, and the garden is a tremendous comfort and a community and a solace for her and a creative expression of who she is. It's wonderful.
Well, it's fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing me here. I'm freezing. My fingers have fallen off. I might be exaggerating slightly. So we're now walking down the gradient back to the car, which fortunately for me has a roof on, so I can defrost a bit. Where are we going to go next, Jill?
We're heading over to the Commons building, which is our main project at the minute. It's a big old Methodist church building, so we'll tell you about it when we get there.
Half a mile away.
Half a mile, and has it got a roof?
It has a roof and a heater.
So we left the Baltic Sea. Nice to be inside a building. More about that building in a minute. But Dave and Jill, I owe somebody an apology here, because Dave's last words to me in the garden was, I'm just going to close the gates. You follow Jill in her car. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, what did go wrong, Dave?
Well, you just drove off without me. I watched you go down the street and I was like, oh, well, there we go.
And then I see you turn around and I thought, hang on a minute, what's your turn? Oh, no.
I was just watching you in the rearview mirror thinking, is he going to stop?
Why is Jill pulled into a nice ice cream parlour? Oh, yeah. So anyway, sorry about that. But it is actually quite funny, really, when you think about it now. It's just, well, we weren't in the middle of nowhere and I'd gone 100 miles.
He could have walked. It was just around the corner.
Yeah, well, talking around the corner, here we are then, in what you call the Commons. I can describe it as, if you know any churches from about 150 years ago, where you'd have a big ceiling and then a small balcony going around it. Some pews are still here on the ground floor. Where we're sitting at the moment, it's right in the middle where there would have been loads of pews in the past. To my right is the pulpit, about 10 foot up, with steps going either side all the way up to it. And what would have been, I suppose, the choir stalls at the back, in their own almost independent gallery, really. It's a phenomenal building.
With a big boombox behind it.
Yes. Tell me more about this building. It's amazing.
Well, it was built 150 years ago by an Australian architect. It's an old sort of preaching hall. You see, Methodist churches, there's nothing particularly sacred about the building. It is a preaching hall. So it's all about the delivery, the performance of the sermon. And actually the acoustics of this building all sort of focus in on the pulpit there, which, as you said, is 10 feet above contradiction. And it's like an old concert hall, really.
Even the stalls, shall I say? Because it's basically what it is, isn't it? Well, it's on a slope.
It's the sloped floor, So it is about the performance. And back in the day, you know, the sermon would be a performance. So you'd have 500 people squeezed in here. You know, back in its heyday, probably even 20, 30 years ago, they would have had 500 people in here, you know, listening. And the preacher has eye contact from up there with everybody in the building. And you can hear it. The acoustics are such that you could hear what he's saying without microphones.
Yeah. It's a lovely, lovely building. When you first walked in here a few years ago, what were you thinking when you first saw the building?
Well, actually, we walked into the back. This is only part, not even half of the property, actually. There's big halls out the back and then some property out behind that. So we walked into that first because there was a choir happening there and different things that were being used in that hall. But we walked in and were just a bit overwhelmed by the property and the fact that it's right on the Yormer Road, which is the main arterial route into the city centre.
Yeah. So I remember driving past it and sort of thinking the Addams family lived here. It's this funny sort of almost gothic-y kind of image to it. It's this, they call it the Pink Church on the Ormo Road. It's got a funny colour scheme. Basically, it was made of this kind of brick that has been absorbing water for about 150 years. The Australian was a great architect, but he didn't really have the grips on the British weather, I think, or the Northern Irish weather. How do you solve a problem of a building that's absorbing water? Well, you paint over it and then lock all the damp in for 150 years and then see what happens.
Having described the building, let's move on then to what can you do with the building? What can you actually do? How can we progress?
Yeah, so the idea was when we first got here, we're not actually Methodists, but we knew some Methodists. So when we came back from India, we knew that we wanted to do some sort of community development work. So we approached the Methodists and sort of said, we know there's a lot about your theology that probably aligns a lot with our more sort of Anabaptist-y kind of theology. And so described to them kind of an idea of what we would love to do. And they said, actually, we wouldn't necessarily always consider this, but actually now is a good time. And so we started exploring that. Even before we came back from India, we were having meetings on Zoom up at the top of a hill in India. So we came back and they showed us the building, and actually then COVID hit very quickly after we came back. So we spent about sort of a year just listening to the community, getting to know the community a bit, finding out what was needed. There was a community choir that was already meeting in the hall out the back that had about 100 members or so, just all local residents and really brilliant. And then we decided one of the things that we've always been really passionate about is eating together. We've talked about the table before earlier in the podcast. And so we decided we'd just do a community meal. We'd put on a community meal on a Thursday night and just invite our neighbors and see who shows up. And we've been doing that ever since. So we do that every Thursday night during term time. We just make a big pot of curry or rice or something, and we invite people. And now we've got probably a good anywhere from 80 to 100 people that come every Thursday night to eat together and just form community together, because community just is about showing up over and over again, isn't it? So that became a really important part of the basis of what we did. And everything we've done actually has come out of that.
I think in one sense you can do anything with any space, and whatever is appropriate. There's 100 ways to skin a cat. I think when you were given the blank page of what would you want to do with a big building on the Ormeau Road, you've got 40,000 cars going past here every day. And in Belfast, this is where the streets have no name, right? Or where they have lots of names, and all those names are important. And every few hundred yards, the demographic changes. What we're doing is probably very contextualized. So it's like we're in 2026 on the Ormeau Road in South Belfast. It's the most diverse constituency in Northern Ireland. Politically and ethnically, demographically, it's quite a creative area. It's near the university. It's a mixed area where traditionally sort of mixed families, which for us is Protestant marries a Catholic, mixed families would come and live in this area. This is the context we find ourselves in. And now you've got lots of newcomer families as well coming in now, people from other parts of the world. I think with us, prayer and hospitality have always been key values, in the sense that let the love that dwells in your heart shine forth in your deeds. It's a very Franciscan sort of concept, but there's this whole idea, let's be filled with the Holy Spirit and let's pursue an interior life. And then let's look for ways for that to spill out into our relationships with the community. And that's also a very Methodist ideal. Wesley had this concept of social holiness, which is basically, don't get so pietistic that you're all into your own personal holiness. Let your holiness be of use to the community. That's where you get the hospitals and the schools and all that. It's a very Methodist kind of concept of reaching out beyond your own sphere, to go to the factory gates or the mill houses, or to preach and to temperance halls, to help meet the needs of society as you see them. So I think this is what we wanted. We wanted to be filled with the Spirit. And then we want to practice hospitality, which is a generous giving out of what we have, a kindness in action.
I think recognizing in that as well that actually it's not so much about us bringing something to the community. We've got a big old building, that's what we can offer. But actually we need the person across the table from us just as much as they are coming to eat. I need something from them. So there's this mutuality that's been really, really important from the beginning. This isn't about us kind of bringing something. It's actually about us all sharing the table together. And actually, I need you, whether you are sort of professing following Christ or not, I need to see the Christ in you just as much as you see the Christ in me. There's the sense of actually the divine is here in the space between us. And we really need that for one another. It's not just a one-sided giving. It's actually this idea that community needs to be amongst each of us.
See, the thing is, people listening around the world to this podcast would say, well, this is a great idea. We could do this. And they immediately approach the church and say, can we do something like this? Put on a meal once a week, let the community come in. And the minister might probably say, that's a great idea. And then I can give a 5-minute impassioned gospel mission statement at the end. And we can do that every week, and I can do that. That's not what you want to do, or is it?
No, I think actually it's just where you start, isn't it? If you start from that point, then that's where you're going to end up. If you start with a heart that says we have to convince people of this thing that we have to give them, actually. But for us, I think the starting point is we have just love that we want to share.
Yeah.
And so it's not about actually convincing them of anything. It's as Henry Drummond said, love is the greatest thing in the world, right? Actually, if we just get to share love around this table, for me, that's God's been encountered. So I'm more about laying the table and letting Jesus do that work in people's hearts. I'll make the space, let us create the atmosphere, but actually let the Holy Spirit do his work, her work in amongst us.
I think also you shared your favourite scripture being Jesus knowing who he was, knowing where he was going, wrapped a towel around himself and went and washed his disciples' feet. That wasn't a 3-point sermon. He said, I have shown you. He then demonstrates something which is very powerful. And then he says, so you've seen me do it, go do likewise. And I think here the gospel in Northern Ireland has been taught and told time and again from street corners, from very high pulpits. It's been yelled, it's been plastered on buses, on billboards. Everybody here has heard a version of the gospel, but it doesn't necessarily strike everybody as good news, otherwise our churches would be full. So for me, I think it needs to be demonstrated. I think the reason Jesus spoke in parables is he was trying to give people an image or a picture of something. He was saying, the kingdom of God is a bit like this. Look, it's a bit like this. And people say, and I think people get it then. And I think here in Northern Ireland, people are very cagey about the church in general. You've had, the Catholic Church was decimated by clergy abuse cases, the Magdalene laundries. That's decimated the authority of the Catholic Church, which was previously a very authoritarian, conservative version of Catholicism. It's been devastated by those scandals. We wrote the book on fire and brimstone preachers here. We've been fighting the Reformation battles of the Middle Ages, just 20, 30 years ago. If you still want to be told you're going to hell, go for a walk in Belfast city centre and you'll be told it. So here people are nervous of the sell they're used to being sold to. And it's almost like that everyone's waiting for the boot to fall.
I think we've lost the right as a church to speak, and we need to just listen for a long time. I think actually we're coming into a time now where a church is going to look very different than it did in the past, and as a church we need to really shut up and listen, because we've spoken enough.
And I think let's listen, but let's demonstrate. This is what I'm saying. You win authenticity by genuinely loving people. And when people know, Floyd McClung used to say, people don't want to know how much you know before they know how much you care. They don't owe us a hearing. And I think you can lose the right to a hearing. I think people just stop listening. People cancel you in their heads. Yeah. And I think we need to win back the right. And what we get when we throw a meal for 100 people every week for 5 years now, when we serve the community in different ways, what does that win us? We set up a community garden. Well, it doesn't win us anything. But what it means is that when we speak, someone may listen. And you win a right, you win a relationship, you win a degree of credibility. You can then contribute, and people are then open to what it is you have to share. And if you're filled with the Holy Spirit, if you've got a life that naturally is overbrimming with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control.
Well remembered.
I sing it in my head as I do it. I've got a song. But then people want some of that. That is in short supply in this world. And people are hungry for that. But they're not hungry for all the stuff, all the conditions, the terms and conditions at the bottom. And I think a lot of that is man-made and cultural, and it's just been foisted upon people.
See, this is almost becoming a bit like the BBC programme Question Time, where we then walk into yours. What have you got to say there? Well, I disagree. So on behalf of Mr. Disagreement, the fact that you've got the Methodist Church backing you, what they're doing here, what have you felt from other denominations in the area?
Actually, it's been really amazing. The Omagh Road is renowned, actually, for the last, since through all the troubles and everything, the Omagh Road, all the clergy on the road have been really, really intentional about actually staying together, united together. So every month the clergy meet all together. The Catholic and Protestants on the whole of the road will meet together and look at what they can do for the community. So it's actually, the Omagh Road is actually very unique in that, and we felt very welcomed, and it's a sense of we're in this together, which has been really unusual. It's quite unusual for Northern Ireland, I think.
And hopefully then the churches on the Omagh Road will say, well, we don't actually do that, but we know a couple and a church that does do that, and that you're working together. So consequently, a church that you might not be able to have a gift in, you can then point them to that church, and that's how you're working. So it's like the whole body going, I get that, brilliant. But what about slightly wider of the Omagh Road? Other denominations, north, south, west, east of Belfast, the whole of Northern Ireland, for instance. And the reason why I'm asking this is for those listening today who want to get their hands dirty for Christ, go and see their minister. Let's just say what might come their way. So what have you had?
Yeah, I think we've really deliberately tried to not be really too involved in churches. I think actually we're not church planting here. We're not actually trying to set up a church. We're developing a community. We're doing community development and opening it up to that, and actually allowing the Spirit to work in that way. In one sense, we haven't had a whole lot of feedback or even kickback because we haven't actually done a whole lot with other churches in the sense that we've tried to very much step outside of that a wee bit.
I think Northern Ireland over the next, well, even now, but over the next 5 to 10 years is going to have a fire sale of big old church buildings because they're not all full and being used like they once were. And we have a situation now where we're coming down with property as a church, and I speak ecumenically, as a church, we're coming down with all these buildings, but not necessarily enough people to fill them or enough ideas about what to do with them. So in one sense, the Methodist Church itself has a history of closing down churches in the city centre. We were sort of thinking, what is the future of the church in the city? How can we stay relevant and useful to the local community to justify having these big, expensive buildings? I think that's a problem that all the denominations face. And I hope they'll look at what we're doing as a contribution to that discussion. We're not trying to sort of say, you're all doing it wrong, this is the right way of doing it. What we're doing is saying, this is what we've done with this big old church building on the Ormeau Road in South Belfast in 2026. I hope you can see that we're trying to reflect the kingdom of God. We're trying to make Jesus, if you like, famous. We're trying to show the love, the compassion, the humility, the grace, the creativity, the outreaching arms of Christ on the road. If people are hungry for what we're eating, then we can tell them the recipe. There's no problem there. I think we're trying to show the love of Christ in a mixed area, which is mixed Protestant, mixed Catholic, mixed lots of nuns. I think of all the people who come to say our community choir or our general community, maybe 60% would be Catholic, 40% would be Protestant. Of those practicing, I would say probably there's maybe 50 are practicing, 50% will be practicing, and 50% won't be practicing anything. So you've got a whole mix of people who believe all sorts of things. And we're in the midst sort of saying, yes, we're a church. A lot of people wouldn't come in because we're a church.
Yeah.
Sometimes I sort of think people who are happy to go into the St. John's or Cook Memorial down the road or one of the other churches here, they do brilliant stuff. These are good guys and they're being led by brilliant people. They're compassionate, they're outreaching, they're putting on community pantomimes, they're doing sort of language lessons for newcomers, they're doing all sorts of really, really cool things. We're not competing with that at all. They're doing great things, but I think we then bring our gifts to the road. The skeptical, people who are wary, they come in here and hopefully they find a welcome. Yeah. And this is where I think it's important for us, to try and build and nurture a brave and bold community of kindness and imagination that honors diversity, that celebrates what we have in common as people. We've got to stop thinking these binary ways, us and them. We've got to start thinking, as people here in Northern Ireland, what sort of society do we want? What does that look like? My guess is we want our kids to be able to walk safely to school and then come home and play safely with their grandparents there. And we want, stable families, and we want good employment. We want safe housing. All of those things actually have resonance of the kingdom of God. Everybody actually wants to live in a world of peace and justice and harmony, but it's just how to do it is the trick.
Yeah.
And I think part of how to do it is, to be honest, finding one another, honouring the space in between us and honouring the quality of that relationship. So how can I make it better? How can I pursue reconciliation with you? How can I ask for forgiveness? How can I offer forgiveness? How can I engage with humility, with difference? And also this is where creativity comes in. Let's be an art centre where creativity is celebrated because we need new ideas. We need new ways of seeing and framing the world.
I think the way that looks practically, if you look at the building and the footprint, what are we going to do? So we're going to take the sanctuary part that we're sitting in at the minute, we're going to turn that into what we call the Cayley House. A friend of ours told us the other day he's a joiner and he's going to come in and help us take these pews and turn them into booths. And then we're going to have a bar at the back for a non-alcoholic bar for a space
Mocktails.
Where that's it. It's quite a big wave in lots of big cities now of non-alcoholic pubs and bars happening. So we're going to ride that wave and we're going to
Temperance 2.0.
And we're going to take a bar out the back, and then we're going to have food carts out the side, which will be micro businesses for people who wouldn't necessarily be able to start up a business on their own. We're going to get these horse boxes and sell lovely ethnic food. This will be kind of an open space during the day where we'll have like a food hall. You can get your food and come in. But in the evenings, we're going to do like an arts venue, community arts venue. So there'll be concerts, there'll be Kayleys, there'll be dances, there'll be yoga. This is the only space that we have at the minute. So there's yoga and sound bath and community choir and all sorts happening during during the week. So that's this space here. If you go further into the heart of the building, there's a big hall at the back with lots of rooms around it. That's all under construction, and we're going to change that into what we call the crack, which is going to be kind of the community space where we have a big community kitchen out the back where we'll do our community meals. But also we want to do like a community kitchen idea where every day people can come and get a 2-pound bowl of stew if they want. And it's just a warm space for people to hang out, because I think loneliness is our biggest pandemic that we've got in the West. So we're looking to inhabit that space. We're going to have a wood stove in the corner. We'll have big tables. We'll have all sorts of things. And then on the other side of that, we'll have our little prayer chapel. And that's going to offer rhythms of prayer throughout the day. We'll have morning, afternoon, and evening prayers happening in our little community. We'll have silent sits, different things that people can opt in and out of, but they know that that's happening throughout the day. And then we'll have a live-in community. So David and I, and then another community member, will live in some flats behind, so that this becomes inhabited kind of building 24 hours a day. There's a sense of actually the hospitable openness. The lights are always on. There's a sense of actually we're making a space that is always welcoming. And then behind that, there's a little greenfield site. That's a part of the project we've called the Currach, which is the little boats that the Irish saints used to sail out into the world. And that is going to be 4 houses. We're going to build up 4 different units of housing for women that are vulnerable. We're working with this great charity at the minute who is going to help us do that. Again, addressing the needs of housing, but also wanting to welcome people that are feeling on the outside of society and helping them integrate into the community as they come into the buildings and into the different things that are happening. So it's a big project. There's 3 different phases. We're in the middle of the first phase, and kind of in the middle of the second with this Cayley house happening, but lots of bringing along the community as we do it as well. So for us, the idea is always about the people that fill it, not the building itself.
Unfortunately, we're rapidly running out of time.
Yes.
But yes, I've gone on about dirty hands yet again. But I also go on about St. Francis, go out and preach the good news to all generation, and if all else fails, use words. The passion that's coming out of you, in particular Dave, when he was off on one, big time, and I mean there's a compliment.
Sorry.
No, because it's a compliment, because the thing is, if people come in here, they're going to say, well, this is a church, well, come and meet Dave, And then you will be showing, both of you just show it in love anyway. Yeah. There's going to be a prayer room there, so they can go and pray. Yeah.
I remember Anne just listening to her podcast, and you spoke a couple of times with her about risk.
Yes.
And about faith. And for me, if you're not feeling uncomfortable, you're probably not pressing in enough. So if it's not slightly scary and uncomfortable, and the problem is in churches, we're so nervous about getting it wrong doctrinally or making some sort of mistake in our encounter that we play it safe and we don't reach out and realize that, there's a person there who doesn't need to be othered, can be embraced, and is on their own spiritual journey. I think when you're uncomfortable, we can make mistakes as well. We're okay to make mistakes. You can tell us we're doing this wrong. That's okay. And bless them, the Methodists have shown us a lot of faith and support. They've given us over £1 million towards this project, amazing, which is amazing. And they're taking a risk with that, because it's not church as you normally do it. So, and how do you justify this? We're really grateful to be working with them, actually. And we're very humbled and blessed by their support. But in all of this, I think we're having a go. We're doing something differently. We're stirring the pot. And we're willing to make mistakes. Because there's worse things than making mistakes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, I keep telling my wife, I never make mistakes. And of course, she believes me. So you mentioned the word yoga. And there might be some traditionalists listening at the moment going, oh, you can't possibly do yoga in a church? Explain.
Or do we have to?
Very quickly, 10 words or less.
It is what you make it.
If that's the battle you want to fight, then you maybe need to fight it somewhere else.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more that's important. Let's focus on the love. Let's focus on the grace. Let's focus on Jesus. And everything belongs. I'm a big fan of actually seeing Christ in everything. And we've spent too long as a church segregating things out and saying some things belong and some things don't. And actually, I think Christ inhabits everything. So if we would stop being so worried about where we can find him and being so fearful if he's not somewhere, actually, if we just decided he's in everything and just took that stance, we'd be a lot happier as Christians.
Well, that's a great answer. Thank you. What you don't know is that I was actually brought up a Methodist.
I think we're all more Methodist than we realise, actually.
Yeah. So for me to come into this building, I feel so peaceful. I was also a Sunday school teacher in the Methodist Church.
So do the yoga people, to be honest.
Really?
They come in here and everyone says, what a beautiful space.
Oh,
this is just wonderful.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. Wow, what a podcast this has been. Last question. Jill, you can start off. Who is your Christian hero, please?
Well, I think it's a bit of a cliche, but I think for me it's Mother Teresa. I think she was such an incredible woman of deep, profound humility and love. And for me, I think when we were living in India, I went to babysit actually for a couple of friends, kids of ours that lived in Calcutta. We lived on the other side of the country, so we hadn't been to Calcutta. So when I went, I was like, I'm going to get there. I'm going to go see Mother Teresa's house. It was such a profound experience. I had 4 little toddlers that trailed along behind me. One of them got his hands all stuck with blue paint as we were coming in, and I hadn't realized, and he was stumbling toward Mother Teresa's like beautiful white tomb with his blue handprints, and it was all chaos and crazy, and the nuns there just totally embraced us and laughed and had such an incredible human experience. There was no sense of this piety, this better than thou holiness. There was just a sense of real life lived and community being embraced and the kids being embraced, and for me that was just such a lovely example of her legacy, that actually they continue to live in the way that she brought into that community, this sense of real humility and kindness and laughter, lots of good laughter.
And of course she was based over here for her 6 or 7 months, so the
Daniel.
chances are she might have gone up or down the Almo Road.
That's it.
And looked at this church and maybe prayed over it. Great answer, thank you. Dave, good sir, you can close please. Christian hero, who would you choose, please?
I think I'm going to go for St. Francis. Also, I was listening to a new tribute to Rich Mullins the other day on the subject of St. Francis, because he's probably like a modern day version in some ways. I pick up on him largely probably because he was a middle class kid who got disillusioned with his wealth and threw it all up and walked away from the control of his father and rebelled in that sense, but then gave himself to the Lord in quite an idealistic kind of way. But then he had a heart for the church and he got this vision to rebuild the church, and he started doing something quite practical and quite symbolic in actually rebuilding an old ruin. And there's something very practical and symbolic about what we're doing, rebuilding this old ruin. But in that he was actually rebuilding the cosmic church at a time when the global church was quite corrupt and quite sort of power hungry. He demonstrated humility, that vow of poverty, that he became a fool for Christ, and that willingness to be a fool for Christ, to be laughed at, to be criticized, to be abandoned, and the great Methodist covenant prayer is, Lord, lay me aside or pick me up, put me to suffering, put me to this, put me to that. This kind of willingness to sort of give over your life in humility to God, and then allowing the Lord to make whatever it is of it. Apparently he suffered glaucoma, and it was a very painful eye condition in his life. And so his brother's son, Sister Moon, kind of like prayers, he was interacting with nature. He had a great sort of sense of the natural world around him. During the Crusades, he went to try and make peace with the Muslims.
He did.
As an ambassador in a cross-cultural context, which was massively out of his time. He went literally over as a peace ambassador to try and make peace between 2 opposing armies. So this kind of guy who sort of carried the gospel and let the love that dwelt in his heart shine forth in his deeds. And that's what I love in Francis of Assisi. Humility, creativity, winsomeness. Lord, please fill us all with your Holy Spirit. And whatever our limitations, whatever our missteps, Lord, please use us because of what we do, despite what we do, in all we do, for your glory. Amen.
What an answer. And I only found out recently reading a biography that his real name, I can't remember what it is.
Frank.
It wasn't Frank, no. He was given the name Francis by his dad because his dad was a travelling salesman, and he would go across the border into France and became a Francophile. He loved France so much that when he came back, he thought, I know what I'm going to call my son. Francis, after the country. If only he'd come to England first. There's a thought for you. Thank you so much, guys, for taking us around here. Absolutely amazing. And I'm looking forward to seeing the progression of yourselves and the church and what's going to happen in Ulmer Road in years to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
And if you haven't already hit the like and subscribe button, please do. It means a lot. Thank you. Next time on Off-Grid Christianity.
And I think there's something to be said about that in general. Like, where I can, I always like to kind of promote people within organizations and go with the people that you know with the skills that they have and bring them up, rather than, external recruitments are such a risk in churches and in other settings for positions of leadership. I'm not saying never recruit externally. I'm saying recruit people externally at a lower grade and then train them up to become the higher grade people. And, if you're doing that well, then that's great. I'm not saying it's something I've mastered, but that's like certainly my preference, because it's, what you're getting and you can ensure that there's a real kind of sense of empowerment for those people and continuation of the things, not of the activities necessarily that happen, but of the vision.
So please join me with a former teacher and now CEO of a foundation charity in inner city London, and that is Helen Fernandez. And wow, what a podcast this is. Until then, cheerio.